Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to this LinkedIn Live with me, Justin York, where this week we're going to talk about, do you have a data ecosystem or a behavior ecosystem? So for the next 20-25 minutes or so, we're going to go through that topic, and I'll expose what I mean about the differences between data ecosystems and behavior systems. It's really important that we understand these things, because the data ecosystem isn't going to work very well if there's a whole load of different behaviors that you're maybe not expecting happening in the background. So as an opening question, just for you to think about, how many of your organization's processes are actually being followed as designed? Because while every organization has a data ecosystem, large or small, doesn't make any difference. Some are more complex than others. Those ecosystems exist, but they don't always look like you might expect. So we have the systems, we have all our data that flows around, whether we store it in the cloud or in some kind of warehouse or wherever it is. It's the behaviors that are shaping the real ecosystem. Because governance often concentrates on structure. It concentrates on rules and controls and processes and operating models and reporting methods and all that kind of stuff. And they're all very important, not suggesting that you don't have to have them. But that structure sometimes does not reflect reality. So people that are creating all these controls and structures and that kind of stuff are not necessarily in tune with what is happening out on the ground at the coal face. Because humans will adapt to the conditions that you place in front of them. So the more controls you put in, the chances are the more innovative they will be in how to get around them to help themselves to save more time, to be more efficient. There is an illusion in some organizations of a perfect ecosystem where we understand what data we've got, where it is, how it's moving around, who's using it, what for, who's owning it, and what the quality of that data is. And organizations, in order to support that view of their ecosystem, they invest very, very heavily in things like tools. All sorts of tooling gets procured, whether it's a data governance tool for your catalogs, lineage, all that kind of stuff, or a data quality tool that you buy so you can keep an eye on all the data quality issues and look at the data in systems and see where there are gaps. Or it might be a reporting tool, whether it's Power BI or Tableau or whatever. Loads of other different tools are available. So they invest in a lot of tooling, but tooling in and of itself is not going to fix any issues. As we've already mentioned, they invest a lot of time and effort in governance, in structures, in controls. Those controls are important, the rules are important, the processes are important. But if nobody uses them, then there's an argument that would say, well, maybe we shouldn't have so many, or maybe we have to look at which ones work best for us. And so there's also this thing about, perhaps about reporting. Reporting can create quite a lot of operational risk. And so if you've got regulatory reports, for example, that need to go in and the data quality has to be a certain level and all those types of things, you can invest a lot of money in reporting, but if the data quality isn't good or it hasn't been checked and it hasn't been validated, then those reports may be incorrect. In the same way, organizations invest a lot of money in AI these days. AI is a tool that is a great thing to have. But if you're in an organization and you're producing stuff from your own AI model, well, if the data quality that goes into it isn't very good, or people have been taking loads of shortcuts and doing lots of different things, then the chances are that whatever is coming out of your AI model is a bit variable in nature. And the final thing that people invest a lot in is automation. Automation is really important because people want to be more efficient. They want you to do more with less. One way of doing that is to automate things. But the more we automate, if we don't take, or we're not cognizant of all the controls and rules and things that we need, then the automation will work perfectly, but what it's producing may not be what you want. And this is why, even with all that investment, deadlines are still slipping. The data quality issues still persist. They're still there. They're there all the time. We have reporting conflicts because people will get a report out, a dashboard or whatever it is, and people won't agree with the numbers. They'll say, oh, I don't think that's right. And so you end up double checking, triple checking what those numbers are. And all of that leads to teams distrusting the data. And the more they distrust the data, the less confidence they have in it. So here's an example. An organization invests in and implements a new enterprise resource planning tool, an ERP system. It's costing millions of pounds. But what they find is, even though you've got this ERP system, what they find is that people are still downloading data out of it into Excel to do their own analysis, to do their own reporting. They're trusting more the things that they get out of their own analysis in Excel than they do out of that system. So that will tell you that you have a system on paper, perhaps, but it's not working in practice. And it has to work in practice for you to get the return on investment for the millions of pounds or euros or dollars that you're putting into it. So all of that kind of stuff is driven out of your behaviours ecosystem. Now, we need to define what we mean by a behaviours ecosystem. And for me, it's the invisible operating layer that is created by a number of human behaviours that may or may not exist in your organisation to some degree. They will be there. There are the shortcuts. People will take shortcuts because it saves them time. So I've used this example before when I was working with the Royal Air Force and an engineering system. They had other at the top of the list of problems that could be recorded against. And if you selected other, somebody had worked out that if you put XXX in the text box where you're supposed to describe the engineering issue, then it allows you to proceed without filling it in. Well, that's all well and good. It saves you a few seconds or minutes, whatever. But somewhere else, it's creating an hour's work when somebody has to go back round and look at that. Now, that was easily solved. You can get rid of that shortcut because you put it at the bottom, or you put it in the middle where it's supposed to be. And therefore, people have to scroll to go and find it. So the chances are that they will use the correct one. We have the interpretations of what we're seeing, interpretations of the rules. You hear about interpretations of the rules all the time in normal daily life, what somebody thought the tax people meant, what they thought somebody had said. That's because we all see the world in our own particular way, our own perspective, our own view of the world. We see that because it's built by our own experience. It's built by our values and beliefs. So we interpret things differently. We have assumptions. Now, I've used this before as well, but remember an organization where somebody drops a spreadsheet into a folder on a Friday afternoon, and finance and on the Monday morning pick it up and they check the data. But what they find is that the data is not correct, but they had assumed that somebody else was doing those validation checks. Somebody else was checking the data. Somebody else was making sure it was accurate. But of course, that's not happening. Lots of these things come out of pressures, time pressures, delivery pressures. Organizations want you to do a lot more with less. Not only do they want you to do more with less, they want you to do it even faster, because there is an illusion that AI is going to make everything faster. Well, it will speed things up. But in a lot of cases, what it does is speed up your visibility of the gaps that you have, the problems that you have with your data. And then we have those workarounds. Somebody's created something because the process wasn't working. They tried to report it, they didn't get a response. So what we end up with is a workaround. They have this own little side process that they use. Over time, that workaround will spread across different people. Oh, we don't have to do that, we do that here. then you end up with something that's outside of the process. So if you do have a problem with the data in your ecosystem, tracking it down becomes a lot more difficult because you have to ask the right person on the right day the right question. And finally, we end up with a lot of undocumented fixes. So people are doing all sorts of fixes to the data, all sorts of these workarounds and shortcuts that are in place, but these things are undocumented. And anything that's undocumented creates risk in your organization, risk in your ecosystem. Because when it's undocumented, nobody's really approved it, nobody's validated it, nobody's checked it, it's just something that happens. And so these things are caused by behaviors. And here's some examples. Bypassing approval steps. Now, it may not be bypassing approval steps, because what might be happening is the fact that the person can complete the whole journey of that activity without it ever being checked by anybody else. And Wahesh Khan commented on one of my posts earlier in the week, and he said that in banking, this tends not to happen. So when they're doing cash checks at the end of the day, it's not left to one individual to do it. It's got multiple checks involved. There's at least two sets of eyes that are doing it, checking it, cross-checking it. And so you don't get these kind of behavioral problems in that process. But lots of other organizations won't have those operational checks. And if you don't have the operational checks, then people can bypass them and can just keep moving through the journey, doing whatever they are doing. We have that behavior of people manually fixing bad data. They see the same thing come out in a report or a set of data that they're going to use to create a dashboard. And what they do is they say, oh, I know what that is. I'll just fix that myself. Right? It takes 5 minutes. That's fine. But if you do it 52 times a year, then that 5 minutes starts to build up. And time is money, because there is a cost to everything that everybody's doing in terms of working. There's a baseline cost for what it is that they do. Copying data between systems, specifically in this instance, Excel spreadsheets. There's lots of copying and pasting goes on between spreadsheets. But if you're not concentrating, you happen to put the value in the wrong field, and I have seen this numerous times, the calculations are completely out. Sometimes you can see it and you can say, well, that isn't right. Something's wrong with that. We need to check that. And other times it's not quite so obvious. It might be, well, actually, that looks all right. Seems fair. That's okay. So we have to be careful of that. We have shadow reporting. Let's follow on from the Excel thing, because lots of people, rather than use system reports, will create their own reports out of Excel. They'll download the data. They'll do their own analysis. And it comes to something as an example behavior that they trust their own analysis more than anything that comes out of that system. And that is a human behavior, because they don't trust or have confidence in what is coming out of the system. And the last one in this sort of example set is those heroes and heroines. The one person that knows everything. The one person you go to if you want a particular issue solving, or you want something happening, you want to know how something happened or how it used to happen. If you're relying on one person, you have a single point of failure. If you have a single point of failure, you have a problem with risk. So therefore, you need to sort of identify those people and have some continuity built around them. Because people generally don't break systems or processes because they're being careless. It's not accidental most of the time. It does happen, but generally speaking, it's not accidental. They're doing it because they have to save time. There's some kind of pressure that's driving them to do that, to make those changes. So why do behaviors matter that much? Well, outcomes, whatever they are, in your organization will not be driven by systems alone. They're not driven by systems alone. Behaviors are driving most of the outcomes. And some of those examples that I've just given you, and some of those things about workarounds and shortcuts and that kind of stuff, these things lead to budget overruns. Projects all the time, you see it, they cost more than was estimated. Now, sometimes that's just because they've been underestimated. And nobody really worked out or caught the fact that it was going to cost a lot more money. Other times, other behaviors have created those budget overruns. If you've got budget overruns, the chances are you've probably got some missed schedules as well, because you may have missed some of the milestones or some of the targets. Some of that can be created by scope creep, because people want to say, well, if you're doing that, can you just add this? Or maybe you could just add that. That would be great. Because if we could have that as well, then that will make everything so much better. So that's because people haven't done the requirements properly in the first place. But those things lead to missed schedules, budget overruns. We might have something like reporting failures, where we put in a regulatory report, maybe it goes in too late, or the data's just not right. And that can lead to things like fines, or certainly queries from a regulator that says, well, this isn't right, what's happening here? And some of those things can lead to compliance issues. Because if we're not complying with things like we should do because of these behaviours, then we run more risk. These things are behavioural outcomes. They're not being driven by systems. They're not being driven by your data ecosystem. So let's have an example. Somebody's come in with a new report they want producing. Somebody very senior, they come in and say, I want this report. And you look at this report and you look at the outline, you go, that deadline's impossible. We'll never be able to get it. We won't even be able to find the data in that time. So then what happens is, as you're rushing around to find data, we don't bother with the validation checks. The team doesn't bother with those validation checks. They just skip them. They assume that somebody, and just to be clear, if you look at your organization chart, I don't think you'll find anybody with the name somebody, but somebody has done the checks. Somebody has done the validation. And so what we then have is this data issue, because if the data isn't right, we have a data issue that enters the reporting cycle. And if nobody picks it up, the report is produced and the executives or whoever who's requested it is making a decision based on inaccurate information. Nobody intended the harm, but they were working very hard to try and get the pressure relieved, to try and do the job within the window. And so people do interpret things differently. Whatever the thing is that you're doing, people interpret it differently, and they will do so because, as I've mentioned before, they have a different view of the world. They have all sorts of things happening that they can see, but their values and beliefs or whatever's driven that may be different, so their interpretation can be different. People also improvise. So if they're not sure what's going to happen, they will do what they think is right. And one thing about humans is that they are inventive and they are innovative. And if we ask people to use their initiative rather than strictly follow the rules, then they will do that. They will be inventive. They will be innovative. That's what they will do. Because people are prioritizing speed a lot of the time over accuracy. They also will react emotionally. Because if somebody is slowing them down or somebody hasn't done their job, well, why is this late? Why have they done that again? Why haven't I got this? So people get a lot of emotional reaction to things. And of course, what we're actually doing is we're trying to be efficient. We're trying to be as efficient as we can possibly be. But if reporting an issue, whether it's a data quality issue or a problem with a process, you may do it 3 times. So think of that manual tactical fix that's done 5 minutes a week. If you report that 3 times and nobody does anything, you don't get any feedback. But what you then get is people just don't bother. So I've got this problem, I'm going to report that. Somebody who's been there a while will probably say, oh, don't bother. They never do anything anyway. There's no point. Just fix it yourself. It's much quicker. That then becomes culture. And when it becomes culture, those behaviors become more and more pervasive. They become more and more embedded. So we have to think practically about how we do these things. So when you see these things occurring inside an organization, we need to understand why the processes are being bypassed. What are the gaps in the process? What are the problems with the process that don't fit operational reality? Because it's those gaps and those issues that we need to understand in order to close them and make them work. We have to find out where pressure exists. There may be one or two individuals, maybe really senior, but there may be one or two individuals who are making unrealistic demands all of the time. And people are put under more and more and more pressure. So they take more and more shortcuts, or they have more workarounds, or they have undocumented fixes. When we think about data quality or processes, or data ownership, I should say, or process ownership, we have to think about, is it abundantly clear who those people are? Because if it's unclear, how do we report to? What do we escalate? How do we get people to do something, to fix something? Think about those heroes and heroines again, those single points of failure. We need to identify those and get some level of continuity around them. Because if you don't do that, suddenly when they are not there, you're not going to know all that information. It's going to be inside their heads. And then you also have to think about the feedback loops. Remember, if you put issues in to get them reviewed, then you want some kind of feedback that something's happening. Now, that might be a link to a data quality dashboard or something like that, where you can look at it and you can check and see what's happening or not happening, as the case may be. But you need some kind of feedback, because even if it's going to take 6 months to get this fixed with the next system release, here is the authorized workaround you are to use. So you get told something, but you also see the light at the end of the tunnel, because in 6 months, it should get resolved. All of these things lead to a need to understand the operational realism of your organization, the operational realism of your data ecosystem, and the behaviors that impact it. So when you go back to your desk or your offices, wherever in the afternoon, ask yourself a few questions. When you start to see workarounds and data quality issues and stuff like that, or problems with processes, think about, where do the workarounds exist? What behavior or behaviors do your systems create unintentionally? Are your governance processes helping you to deliver or slowing you down? Because they should be enabling and helping you to deliver things, particularly data governance. What are the hero areas inside your organizations? Who are they? What is that culture? Where are they? Can we find them? Understand what it is that they know. And whereabouts is it that people stop reporting problems? So is there a particular area like finance or HR or wherever where we don't see people reporting problems anymore? Because if you want trusted data, you can't just map the systems. You need to also map the behaviors. The real operating model of any organization is the one that people will actually follow under pressure. So that's the end of this data ecosystem or behavior ecosystem. And Findile has left me a comment. One of my experience later, a lot of investment in formalizing artifacts, policies and documents before understanding the behavior in the ecosystem. Yeah. And we need policies, we need frameworks, we need processes, all that kind of stuff. But if you don't actually understand what's happening inside your ecosystem, whether that is what data have you got, where is it, how does it move around, etc., then you're going to have a load of behaviors as well that are also not going to support your policies and those types of things. And therefore, while things for compliance or approval of documents needs to be done, all of those things are no good unless people use them. Because if people don't use them, you may as well not write them. Yeah, it's a nice tick box and all that kind of stuff. That's great, but it's not going to help you in any way. So that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you've got something out of this concept of the difference between data ecosystems and behavior ecosystems. Don't forget, I've got that scorecard. If you want a link to that, drop me a message and I'll happily send you the link to the scorecard so you can have a look and go through how you think your ecosystem's working. And next week, I'll be talking about why nothing ever feels or stays fully fixed in your data ecosystem. So join me then, and I'll see you next week, and we'll go through that particular topic. Thanks very much.